everybody. Welcome. My name is Bryn Durgan. I'm the Director of Programming here at Bookstore One. And if it is your first time in the bookstore tonight, then you should know we do a hell of a lot of programming up here. So we do writing workshops, author events like you'll see tonight, Spanish literary salons. If it has to do with stories, we're probably doing it. So if you aren't already signed up for our newsletter, you can just do that right downstairs at the register, if you're interested in seeing more of what we do. Okay, so now, this evening, we get to celebrate someone who writes not just about water and sport, but about deep connection between passion and place. But before we jump in, I want to shine the spotlight on a couple of organizations that are here with us tonight, Suncoast Waterkeeper and the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program. So these are two organizations doing important ongoing work to protect the waters that shape life here on the Gulf. They're both here tonight sharing information, and we're grateful for everything they do. I also want to thank Rusty, who connected me and Monte. Without his enthusiasm, where is Rusty? Oh, there you are. Without his enthusiasm, yeah, no. Without his enthusiasm for getting people together, then we would probably not be here tonight.
Rusty.
I know, yeah, Rusty. We're gonna hear from Rusty too. But here we are. So here's how the evening will flow. First, our author of the hour will be in conversation with Dr. Ryan Gandy, who's the executive director of the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program, someone whose work, research, and lived experience brings a powerful perspective to the themes of stewardship and ecology that run through tonight's book. Then we'll open it up for audience questions from all of you before segueing into the book signing. I do want to note that we've run into the best problem, which is that we've sold out of Monte's books. So we have some more that will likely be in tomorrow. If you are interested in having your book personalized, then if you go down to the register, James will give you, you'll just pre-order the book, James will give you a book plate, and you can have Monte sign it at the end. Okay, now let me introduce you to our guest. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Saban, The Making of a Coach, along with Lords of the Fly, which was named one of the best books of the year by Field and Stream and Outdoor Life, and described by the Wall Street Journal as wonderful, a lush panoramic book. His other books include Fourth and Goal, which won an Axiom Award for biography, and Sow Belly, a Sports Illustrated and Amazon Best Book of the Year, that was also selected for Barnes & Noble's Discover Great New Writers Program. He's the co-editor of Leaper, named one of the best books of the year by the London Times. His latest book, which again you have to get today, is called Rivers Always Reach the Sea. It's been praised by Booklist as well-written, witty, and insightful, and in January of next year, he'll release Men of Troy, about the enduring legacy of Pete Carroll's USC Trojans. So now, before we give Monte a round of applause, I want to introduce you to Rusty, who will tell you a little bit about this program tonight. Okay, so here's Rusty.
Thank you everyone for showing up tonight. Of course, we wouldn't be doing this without you. And I'd like to thank Bren and Bookstore One for doing these sort of events, very important. But one of the ideas behind all of this is to get more people like you, anglers, people who appreciate and use the water, more involved in conserving and preserving this resource. And that's one of the things I really liked about Monte's book. I've read the Lords of the Fly and this one. This last one just really captured me because it talks not only about the excitement of fishing, but it talks about people and the characters you meet, and most importantly about the importance of conservation and protecting this resource. And Ryan, who's here with us tonight too, we're so blessed to have Ryan as our new executive director of the Estuary Program, because not only is he a really good scientist, but he's also a fly fisherman, a fisherman who's someone who knows the water, and I think that's just so important. So once again, thank you everyone for coming tonight. Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks, Rusty.
So, did you bring a guitar?
I did not. I am not
Have one air guitar.
But you can see we're sold out because there's a gap. I look
Yes.
good. So, I was wondering with your book, what was it that sparked? It's kind of a unique book. It's a collection, a new series. So, what was the spark that got you really thinking about putting those together as you did?
We can't hear?
Yeah.
We can't hear.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Rusty, and thank you, Brandon, and thanks to Bookstore One, and thank all of you for coming. I mean, there's a million other things you guys could be doing right now, so I really appreciate it. Seeing my uncle and my aunt over here too, which is great. So collections are very funny. They don't necessarily, publishers don't love collections for whatever reason, but I love them. One of my favorite, probably my favorite fishing book is Tom. You guys do Tom McGuane, as I hope, right? He put together a book called The Longest Silence, which is a collection of his stories. And I always sort of wanted to, I feel like I'm a pale disciple of Tom's. I'll never reach that height, but I always wanted to kind of emulate him and do that. And I love collections. I think it's really fun to kind of read, a short piece here, a short piece there, maybe a little bit longer piece. It's very fun to put it together too, to have like a mix of profiles, which are kind of longer pieces, and then just essays. They're very different kind of disciplines when you're writing. And so, I always just wanted to have one, so it was fun to put together.
Yeah.
In 31 stories, I don't know how I landed on 31. But probably should have been 30 or 32. Does Baskin Robbins have 31?
Well, it's nice because you can pick it up and set it down at different times. That's what I found was nice about reading it, is that I could read a couple stories over a cup of coffee in the morning and then set it down and just come back to it a little later on. It's really nice. So with the title, it's an interesting title. And you have a collection, this collection, and then the title of it. How did you kind of bring that out of all those stories?
Does anyone know where that title comes from? Has anyone heard of the band Led Zeppelin?
Yeah.
So there's a song on Physical Graffiti called 10 Years Gone, and Robert Plant has this wailing thing where he says, "Rivers always reach the sea," which I've always loved. It's this wonderful sort of, he's like, sounds like an Irish banshee or something like that. Now, of course, rivers, not all rivers do reach the sea, which a lot of internet nerds have gotten all over me about. I can't tell you how many Facebook DMs or whatever they're called. People are like, actually, Colorado wasn't, it's like, I know, metaphorically true, but. So I don't know. I just always loved it, and it has this sort of, nice alliteration to it. I don't know. It just seemed kind of like the right number of words. But mainly it was the Led Zeppelin song. Led Zeppelin lyric, I should say.
Right, now I have an earworm, and I'm going to think about that song from your life. It's great to have theme songs.
It is.
So, a lot of times you've said that fishing is about the why, not the how. Is there a story within there that really exemplifies that?
I hope that all of them do. I'm not really good at telling people how to fish. By all rights and means, I should be the world's best fly caster. I've had personal instruction from Lefty, Kreh, Nathaniel Linville, Steve Huff, and Andy Mill. And I am not the world's best fly caster. I'm very, very far from that. So the how-to part is not like my forte. But to me, the why is always more interesting in anything. And especially when it comes to storytelling and stuff like that. That to me is why novels are so great, why great movies are so great. So I hope all of them sort of address the why. I don't know if there's one in particular that does, but they're all sort of an expression of my why. And I think we all have our own whys, right? So these are just mine.
Right. Well, it's like that evolution you hear with fly fishing. You first start out just trying to catch a fish.
Yep.
And then you go through the different stages of how many you can catch and how big you can catch, and then it becomes the approach.
Right.
How do you think about the environment they're in? How do you get to them? How do you entice them along the way? But with that, it really builds that obsession in a way. With any of these folks that stick with it a long time or just get into it, have that obsession that comes with it. And I think that's a thread that I see in the book a good bit here and there. And I didn't know if you could expand on that a little bit more about how you see obsession and how it works with different folks.
It's really funny. I mean, someone asked me this question one time, and I went back and looked at all of my books, and I looked at pretty much all of the stories I've written over the years, and they're almost all about obsession, or about obsessed people. I don't know, to me obsessions are so interesting because they're kind of what makes the world go round, right? They're like what gets you out of bed, and we're all obsessed with something sort of, what animates you when you get out of bed. And it's, for some people, fishing for tarpon world records is like the silliest thing they've ever heard, but for other people it's everything. And I've always loved that. I mean, I think there's not a lot of difference between some of these guys in this book, Andy Mill, for instance, or Lefty, Kreh, and LeBron James. I mean, they're just obsessed with different things, and one is more popular. Of course, obsessions have a dark side too, which also intrigues me. And Sylvia Plath said, she said, I desire the things that will kill me in the end, basically. I'm paraphrasing her a little bit, but will destroy me in the end, that's what she said. And so that part of the sort of dark side of obsession also has always sort of intrigued me as well. And you know, obsessive people get things done. I mean, they get to the top of Everest, they get to the moon, you know, they crash and burn. So that's a really fascinating thing. And you know, I've always loved, there's a, fishing writing to me has always been really interesting because it's a naturally kind of contemplative sport. It's actually, I think it's the most written about sport in the world, I believe, if you take the volume of all the fishing writing. Mainly, you know, Atlantic salmon and trout are kind of the two things that are written about most, but there's a sort of natural contemplative nature to fishing, which allows you spend a lot of time fishing, even if fishing with a friend, you're kind of in your own head, thinking about stories. You think about, how can I entice this fish? You're telling the fish a story. You're trying to sell them on a story with a fly ring. And then you're thinking about the obligatory kind of like, you know, how am I going to describe this day to whomever, how was the fishing, you know, you have to figure out that story, and then you talk about the ones you lost, and the ones you hopefully caught. And then of course, you know, the fly cast is actually, if you do it well enough, which I don't all the time, it actually forms an arc, which all stories have a great, you know, you're supposed to have a good narrative arc. So to me, that's always been a really fun thing it just allows so much time to think. And I think that's one of the reasons why baseball, by the way, is the sort of spectator sport that's written about most, because it's not nonstop action. There's a lot. In fact, it's mostly not action. Right? I mean, it's just mostly people sitting around spitting and rearranging their, you know, their gear and stuff like that. But I think that just the time to breathe is important, and I think it just makes you sort of think in a writerly way, and also makes you think about the why.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are going to draw into that because you have that solitude. You know, even in as busy as some of the water bodies we're in nowadays, and we talked about that before about how, you know, what it was when we were kids compared to what it is now. But you can still find that moment, that focus, that moment, you know, and whether it's successful or not, it's still a moment that sticks with you. And I think that's the interesting thing about that. But you know, along the lines of, and you know, fisheries and environment and the kind of the arc of that through time, you know, from when you started as a kid to even started in your writing and then now, what is your impression going to all these different places of that kind of trajectory or arc of fisheries and estuaries and that kind of thing? I'm really curious to see.
It's so funny. I mean, there's a story in here about this little tiny spring creek in Pennsylvania called the Littoral, which was at some point kind of a famous little creek because the people who fished there kind of invented fishing with terrestrials. If you trout fishing, you know what that is, like fishing with a cricket or something like that. And I got there, I think in like 95 was the first time I fished there, and I was like, this place is so awesome, it's beautiful, right? So it's like these beautiful, thick water, look like baby oil, totally clear spring creek, gorgeous. And I would talk to the old guys, and they were like, you have no idea what you're talking about. So we all bring our sort of own recency bias to this thing, but I've now been doing it long enough where I can see, you know, degradation in certain spots. Steve Huff last night went to the event with a guy named Steve, who was inducted into some Hall of Fame last time. He had a great quote. He said, "It's not as great as it once was, but you can still find great days. You can still find greatness," which I think is a really, you know, I think there's with the conservation message, optimism is always a good thing to throw in there a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of like dourness when it comes to conservation, and I think it's a good thing to realize that there are good days still, and that there is still something worth kind of fighting for.
Yeah, well, you know, you lose that concept and you've already lost the battle, right? I mean,
Exactly.
I think, and you know, that's the challenge with a lot of the restoration, with a lot of the water quality work we both do with the water, you know, estuary program, the water keepers. You know, it's that again a passion you stick with, but it's also something that we all know that we're not going to get back to a yesteryear. But what we can do is make today better and looking to the future better. Because we have, it's really interesting living when we do with the amount of technology and information we have on estuaries and fisheries and how they've evolved and how they've had problems over the years. So I think that it's an interesting time to live because you're actually watching a lot of this in real time and have the tools to address it.
I mean, there's another quote, I forget who said it, but basically how I come to conservation is sort of pessimism, a slight pessimism of the intellect, but an optimism of the will. And I think that's the sort of thing that you gotta have some kind of optimistic, fight in there.
You do. You can't let the small battles get you down because you got to have that longer view. And I think the other thing is that we've got to come back to, and that's why it's nice to have fishing and fishermen, as one way to tie you into the environment. But we have so many other folks that are just going out there and observing, whether it's birds or whether it's paddling, and continuing to hold that passion when you come back off the water. I think is an important thing. Because we're passing this to our kids, we got to do our best for
Our
it.
grandkids.
And our grandkids, yeah. So, it's funny, I wonder, as I was reading the book, what, if you had a choice to go back to one spot, you get that last one, yeah, you got 31 to pick from. Which one would you choose and why?
I think just because we can't go there now, I'd probably go back to Russia. I went to the Kola Peninsula, which is on the western side of Russia, and it was where all the nuclear submarines were. Of course, it's now closed off, but it was literally like it was a 2-week fever dream when I was there. I don't really remember. I kind of felt like I was having an out-of-body experience the whole time I was there. The constant vodka shots you had to take did not help. But you just, you're in this weird tundra, and girl falcons everywhere, and wild rivers with nothing around it. And big Russian guides walking around with Kalashnikovs, trying to, because it might be bears, I guess. I never asked them why they had the big guns. I didn't want to know. But, so I think Russia would probably be that place. But I really love my home waters. I really like. To me, getting to know and getting intimate with sort of a couple of different waters that are in your backyard is about as satisfying as anything you can do. So, and I love Florida. I'm trying to get my wife to move down here. Not working.
It's funny you say that because it's when you do travel to a lot of other spots, what still holds you and takes you out there are those little spots you figure out.
Absolutely.
And it's all about the figuring out and then protecting it over time. Because that's the thing with conservation is that you build that love for something or that appreciation for something, and it builds that willpower to fight for it.
It's Aldo Leopold. We protect what we love.
Well, just back to some of the characters in the book. I always wonder because you fly fishing pulls them all together, fishing in a way, or outdoors in a way. But from your perspective of the characters you see, it's that range, right? From superstars to just that kind of average Joe. What is a common thread that really holds those folks together?
That's a great question. I think it's just the same thing that many of us experienced when we first felt that first connection with a fish. It's just this. For some people, I feel like when you cast a fly out or whatever, you feel that kind of electric thing. You're done. You're totally done. So I feel like from Andy Mill and from Lefty Kreh all the way to some of the, cornflower eater Russian dudes that I fish with in New York, it's the same thing. It's kind of it's that feel. But then it's like, as you said, so many other things too. You start to being in that environment becomes something you kind of can't live without. Being out there and everything that kind of goes along with it, your buddies, your foul weather friends, as some people call them. There's all this stuff that you just literally can't. I can't live without it. I don't know how I would live without it.
No, I agree. It's a grounding. It's like you can go out, you don't have to catch anything that day, but you're out and you're out in a different world, and it really takes that stress out.
Yep. And as you said earlier, you mentioned earlier, it's kind of like you're solving a problem every time you're out there, which is kind of fun, right? It's a lot like writing in that way, in that you're gathering. I've always thought that writing a book or writing a story is a little bit like every little piece of information when you interview someone is like a piece of a puzzle, and you get this big box, and you throw all those pieces of puzzle in the box, shake it up, and then when you've got enough, you shake it up and you throw it on the ground. You got to put the things together. And fishing is a lot like that. There's the puzzle of the tides, there's the puzzle of the wind, the puzzle of the flies, your casting ability. There's all sorts of kind of really cool things that go into this great problem that that we just kind of do for fun.
Right. And it's one of those that lasts off the water. because you start thinking about it, you know, as you need those breaks during the day from whatever you're doing, you kind of daydream about it. You start looking, you know, like pick up the tide, might try to think about where you are in the season, you know, and where you need to be.
My wife and kids always make fun of me because whenever we're driving, when we go over a bridge, over a river, I'm always like, always, even if I've gone over the same bridge 15 times
Yeah.
or 50 million times, I'm still looking at, you know,
Yeah.
checking it out.
I tell you what, it's great when you pass that addiction on to your kids. And just got back from our trip. We were over down to Georgia, and my son was doing the same thing. Hey, Dad, I'm seeing this lake over here, and he's got his phone out, or he's, you know,
It's good use of the phone, the only good use of the phone.
that and tides, and you know, a few other things. So you know, you have 31 stories in this book. You had to have a lot more than that, probably. I mean, the way it looked like it was you were pulling out of journals in a way, or something. Is kind of how it felt.
Yeah, I mean, there were more. There were some that just didn't make
Some
cut.
B-sides,
Yeah.
right?
There were some B-sides in this, actually,
Yeah.
but there's just some that felt redundant, maybe. I mean, I was another striper story probably would work, another tarpon. You know, there was I had to kind of just call the list a little bit, and which was really fun, actually, in a weird way, to kind of go through kind of relive all those. I hadn't read some of those stories in 10 years, 15 years, so it's kind of fun to kind of go through those.
Get back in the journal and
Yeah,
look at it.
yeah.
Yeah. It's funny how many fishermen I know that collect, their journals are location, tides, sketch. When I was a kid, we used to sketch out flats.
Yeah.
Because that was what the books, like Lefty's one of his early books, it was hand sketched flats. Now you look at things and it's a map or it's a chart, or everybody cheats with their GPS. But back then you had a paper chart and a map. It kind of added a little bit to
That's
the
great.
the
I mean,
fun to
the
it.
first time I went to the Bahamas, an artist named John Swan, I was going to a place that he had been, and he drew a little map
Yep.
and he put little bonefish tail. He's like, this is a good tail, telling spot. He put little bonefish tails on it, and I have it. I still have it. Actually, I feel like framing it, but I probably should frame it. But it's in my bonefish book that I looked at before. Bonefish, but it's way cooler than a phone, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like this, you know, I don't know. There's something cool about it.
Well, it's funny. It's how that I was out in the Bahamas with my wife. We got married there. We eloped, went out there, and we're sitting at the bar, it's Daniel K, and just chatting to a couple of folks. And I had the same experience where talking to somebody who's like, yeah, you know, if you take, because they had these little 13-foot whalers, and that's all we did. We ran all around, little handheld GPS back in the day. It was like this big. And he did the same thing. Drew it out, told you where to go, because it's a community. You know, it's a community that kind of shares. So it's nice. Yeah, another thing I was curious about is how your writing style or your writing approach has changed. I know it's not all fishing books, but
Yeah.
at least for the fishing books, how, you know, from where you started to kind of what does that arc look like?
I mean, that's a very hard thing for me to kind of go up in the air, 50,000 feet and look
Mhm.
down on that. I will say that it has not gotten easier, and I always thought it would get easier, and it hasn't at all. And in fact, but I've come to kind of realize that is kind of the point, and that actually was what makes it really great, because every time I look at it, if I'm doing a book or you know, when I started the book that's coming out in January, I remember vividly the first page. I had all my notes right here, and I opened up the thing on the computer, and there was a cursor blinking right there, and I was like, holy crap! And you know, that book ends up being 458 pages, so whatever, a year and a half later, it's become this thing. But it's always intimidating. It's never gotten easier, but like I said, I think that's kind of the point. It's kind of what keeps you fresh. You can't cheat it. You have to put everything you got into it, whether it's the reporting or the writing. You just always have to do that, and I think that's a really good thing. I have a lot of friends who are like, you know, in corporate jobs where they're like so sort of bored. I mean, they have gotten better at it, right? And they're just bored with it a little bit. So I love this. I'm terrified every time I sit down to write, which is not terrifying, but I'm scared.
Right.
That would be bad if I was terrified. But there is this is slight like, oh my God, am I going to be able to pull this off? And I think that's a good thing. I think that's what keeps you motivated.
Well, yeah, that's human nature. You have to have that. We're designed to meet that challenge and meet disaster in some way, and
Right.
try to avert disaster. And that's what it always feels like, you know, same thing, we're even writing scientific papers.
Yep.
You know, you have all the data, everything's sitting in front of you, and now you have to put this together in a story. And the blinking cursor is
Yeah. But it's fun when you get into it. There's
Yeah.
nothing, very few things as fun as being completely into a story or a book when you know, I'll be walking around and I'll see a tree and I'll hear a bird and I'll be like, oh, that reminds me of a sound that I could put in this story because everything is funneling into this one thing that you're doing, and that total absorption is a lot like fishing, actually. It's just super fun. It's a kind of a low-level high that you're on for as long as it goes.
Yeah.
Full end.
It's a life high, right?
Yep.
It just pulls you forward. So speaking of, kind of writing and books, and what are you working on now, or what is your next?
I've got a college football book coming out in about a month, 5 weeks, I think, about USC when Pete Carroll was the coach there. So it was a 9-year run, very similar actually to the actual Trojan War time period anyway. And it's fascinating. It was like this, it's got a great arc, actually. It's got this, they were a terrible team. He was a terrible coach. They met, he took the team over, they kind of built, they won a bunch of championships, and they kind of slightly fell, and then boom, they ended in this horrific Reggie Bush scandal. You might remember that. So that was very fun to work on. And so now I'm just kind of doing publicity for that,
Okay.
which is the worst part of the book. It's standard. I like these things, but I don't like going on social media and doing all that kind of stuff.
Avoid that at all costs. So, one of the things I always think about when I think about whether it's environmental stuff or, when you have folks like you that have been around and you've got, had a career and you've got young folks in the room looking at writing, looking at outdoor writing specifically, what advice would you give to a young outdoor writer now? Because it's got to be a challenging environment. I mean, with people's attention spans, 2 minutes, So how, I just wonder about that, because we talk to scientists all the time about that, upcoming scientists.
And plus you have the introduction of AI, which even if you don't use AI, it is affecting how people read things a little bit. And there was a great story in the New York Times Magazine about, you guys know what an M dash is? So like when you write a sentence and you have a dash in it, and apparently one of the AI things uses an M dash a lot. So now I'm all worried about, I don't want to put an M dash. I don't want to be accused of doing it. So I think so there's lots of headwinds, I guess. But my advice is always to, find the writers that you would like to write like. Whether that's, it could be fiction writers, it could be nonfiction writers. Read their stories, and then reread them and reread them and reread them. I mean, writing is a lot like music. We're all derivative, right? We were all, I read and reread Longest Silence over and over and over again, and tried to, in my head, write like that. It doesn't come out like that. Just like when a jazz musician tries to play like Charlie Parker, it doesn't come out like Charlie. It's their own thing, but it's still derivative. So I've always thought that reading is kind of an underrated part of the writing process. And so is reporting. So going out and actually talking to people and interview them and really listening to them, right? And taking good notes and noticing things. I mean, the great thing about being a writer is you're a professional noticer. It's so fun. So you're being paid to go sit and notice things. I mean, it's the best job ever. I love that part of it. So, that's always been my big advice. And then just write. You have to write until you find your, they call it a voice, whatever you want to call it. Until you find that, until you find your comfort, in being able to do this thing. Yeah.
Well, it's great. I think it will inspire some folks to, hopefully some young folks to start writing and getting into
That'd be great.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to get them when you can,
Yeah.
whether it's through fishing, whether it's through writing, whether it's through getting more folks talking about the outdoors, to build that awareness. Because, here in Florida, we have such a high turnover of folks,
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like a unicorn, being a long family lineage.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things to where, you don't want people to feel other. And I think that's the thing, is that having resources there that speak to your local environment about what is going on to build that passion, because we're all in this together.
Yep, for sure.
And it's something. So I really appreciate the time and
Of course. I appreciate what you guys do very much. I mean, you make it possible for me to do what I do.
Yeah, it's great.
Now you vote.
So I don't know if we wanted to see if the
Audience
folks,
questions?
yeah, have some questions.
Go ahead. Did you ever have time to hang around Howell Raines at all?
You can just look it off.
I did. Hal was good friends with my uncle, and so I would see him on Thanksgivings.
He wrote Fly Fishing Through Midlife Crisis.
And he was the editor-in-chief of the New York Times. for
And
a
chief
number
of the New
years.
York Times who got
He
fired
got
under-
Jason Blaird.
Yeah,
Yes.
Jason Blair, yeah. But that, the first time I saw your book, Florida Fly, was sitting on a coffee table in Islamorada. And when I started reading it, I thought about Howell and that book. That was sort of the introduction of your that type book.
Yeah, it was a great, I love that book.
Yeah.
And we're still in contact. I mean, we talk to each other.
Where is
as
he
well.
now? Is he
He
in
lives
Birmingham?
on the Delaware River in Pennsylvania, kind of south, not in the trout part, but the, Jersey, across the New Jersey shore.
And is Max McGee in your book?
No,
Do you know who?
I don't. Should I?
He owns the Choo Choo Fly Shop in Chattanooga.
Great name. Heard of it. Sounds like they might have Legos there and stuff.
The only reason I'm saying this is because that book, the 21 places you should fish before you die, one of them is that Russian river you on.
Oh, cool.
And the guys flew in by helicopter. They're in the middle of nowhere, and the guy says we hadn't seen a human in 4 days, and they round the corner in the river, and there's a person standing in the middle of the river, throwing the most perfect loop ever. And they said, "My God, there's a human." Guess who it was? Max McGee from Chattanooga. And they said they don't even know how he got there, and he didn't even stop. They walked on by, he kept on fishing.
Yes.
I got a question for you. A lot of times people will ask me how I got here or why I'm here, and I usually say it's because a father took a 5-year-old son fishing. How did you get started fishing?
Sort of the same. I mean, family definitely. My grandfather was a big time fly angler. He fished in Islamorada and fished for trout and fished in Iceland and stuff like that. And then my dad was a fly fisherman as well, mainly a hunter, but he liked to fish as well. And then my uncle's a big. My uncle is the writer Charles Gaines, who sort of inspired me to become a writer too as well. But so it was very much like it's funny because I have two younger brothers, and one of them is like me, kind of really into it, and the other one's just like, I don't want anything to do with this. So it's funny. It's like freckles almost. Like you get it or you don't get it. I feel like. But yeah, no, I love it. It's a wonderful connected thing with, and I've been doing that with my daughters actually. But it's a wonderful way to. I don't know. It's just a cool way to connect. I feel like.
Personal curiosity, so the Cola Rivers, which one was your favorite? And you fished the South Island of New Zealand yet?
I have not fished in New Zealand. That's one of my bucket list places.
You might change your mind after that.
I think probably the Karlofka was the coolest. It was like this big, mean, awesome river. It was just giant. It was beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, we flew helicopters there. So in fact, a year after, this is a terrible story, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but a year after when they would pick you up, they would want to land almost on top of you, so you didn't get out, so they could kind of see you, I guess, or that they wouldn't chop you up. But 2 years after I was there, there was a draft or something happened, and the blades went like that, and it didn't work out for the people who were picked up. So there was always that sort of, maybe that's why it was a fever dream, because there was always like, well, are we really doing, like, am I really flying around in a helicopter? And the helicopters had, I'm not kidding, had duct tape in them. Duct tape holding things together. I'm not kidding either. I was like, is that duct tape?
And they tie their boots with twine. The helicopter pilots tie their boots with hay baling twine, and they get on and you go, what?
They're all like old Soviet era 1980s.
They're Afghan, holdovers.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to say one thing about Max McGee. I happened to fish with him in Colorado, and he was the guide. And we're in a drift boat, and it was the area where grass was hanging over the side, and you got to throw a fly under it to get a big brown out. None of us could do it. It was the greatest 5 minutes of fishing I ever saw in my life. He jumps out of the boat in a stream going like this with boulders. And he hands us the paddles and he said, y'all just take care of the boat. I'm gonna show you what you need to do. He's running down the river. I mean, you would fall 100 times. He didn't. And he was backhand casting under the grass and hooking browns. And he caught 5 in 5 minutes. And got back in the boat, and I looked at my and said, did I just see that?
That's amazing.
Just the most amazing fishing skill I'd ever seen. And I don't even know where he is now, but he was the best.
Let's look them up. Anyone?
Question. It's a writing question. How do you get through the muddy middle when you're not inspired anymore and you're like,
Deadlines. I mean, honestly, I think deadlines are what kind of, I mean, I've never missed one. In fact, I try to be like my wife was with my 3 children, a little bit early. To me, that's like the most motivating. Like I put that date down and I'm like, I don't really care what it takes. I'm gonna get there. And I just actually really, when I'm really into it and Friday at like 6 o'clock hits, I'm always like, dang. Like I want to keep going. Like I'm kind of bummed the weekends come and I won't be in my routine. It's so fun. So I don't, there are times when you are not writing well, like when you don't sleep well or something like that. Like, but in those days, you just have to sit down. And there's no such thing as a muse, right? When I got into this, I was like, oh, there's someone, a little muse going to sit on my shoulder and tell me all this kind of stuff. The muse is you sitting in your chair and just sometimes typing gibberish, but just going through, biomechanical thing of actually doing it, right? And I think that's my only advice for that.
thank you.
Do you set aside a time every day?
No, I just, it's, I pretty much work from 9 to, or 8 to 6, something like that, and not writing the entire time, sometimes researching and stuff like that, but sometimes writing the entire time.
And how has fly fishing affected your sensibilities as a writer, the way that you write?
I think a lot, just because as I spoke about before, the contemplative nature, but also it's like fly fishing is a bunch of little tiny things that add up to a whole. Like, so there's sort of like the words and the sentences that add up to a story or add up to a book. Sort of. I mean, that's sort of how I've always looked at it. So, and it teaches you patience. It teaches you about failure, which is always a good thing to learn about. And like I said too, it's like it is a problem that writing is essentially a problem you're solving, right? I mean, you're trying to solve a problem, really. And so fly fishing is a lot like that. But I think the contemplative thing is the thing that gets me. I've made some huge decisions in my life, either on a fly fishing trip or like driving home at night. Decided to ask my wife to marry me, and lots of other things that I've kind of decided since I've done that. Someone back there?
Oh, I had a question. You said a lot of conservation's doom and gloom, but you like to add something optimistic. I need to know what gives you hope.
What gives me hope is people like these people. What gives me hope is a lot of people that I know who are involved in fishing are also involved in conservation. What gives me hope is great organizations like BTT. To be honest with you, I'm serious. I mean, you guys do great. These guys do too. It's science married with energetic, smart people. We've always had organizations, but I feel like there's been kind of a good step up in terms of the science being done and the sort of energy and the sort of message, the sort of honing of the message, I think. So that gives me a lot of hope. And most, a lot of young anglers that I know anyway, are they have much more of a better conservation sense than even I did when I started. I wasn't aware that there was a problem, I'll put it that way. They're very much aware. And so that gives me a lot of hope.
Any other questions?
Yep, I have one. So if you're not fly fishing or fishing and being out in the wilderness, how are you gonna write? Are you stuck out there? Not that it sounds like you wanna be out there fishing.
Oh,
It's your
yes,
love, your passion.
Do you
But
write
if you don't
outside?
do it, what happens?
It's a funny balance, actually. This is actually, for the last, 15 years, been the most fruitful time for me to write. It starts at the end of October, which just happens to be the end of fishing season, until about March. And I get a lot done in the wintertime. Like, that's a real hardcore thing. But during a regular week during fishing season, it is, to me, it's always fun to have the carrot out there. Like, all right, if I really bear down on this and write whatever it is, 5,000 words or 10,000 words or whatever, I'm gonna give myself a little treat and go fishing for half a day or
Oh, yeah,
something
it
like
is
that.
the carrot.
So, but it is kind of a funny balance. Like, but I always find it's more fun to fish when I'm working really hard than it is when I'm not working hard. I enjoy it more. I appreciate it more.
Can you
When
write
you're on your
outside? Or do you have to be inside?
I can't write on my computer. I take a lot of notes outside, but no, I don't. I can't sit and I can't even do it. I can barely do it in coffee shops. I have to have TFS, total effing silence, except for the dog. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up all over the place. I was born in New Hampshire, in Vermont, Alabama, North Carolina, Alabama, Virginia, no, New York.
Question back there.
Yeah, so how do you land on these obsessives in your writing?
It's funny, as soon as I kind of spy one, I'm like, I'm gonna write something about that person. I actually, on one of my next, I'm doing a story in March on a woman named Kat Vallely, who's Nathaniel Lindville's wife, but more impressively than that, she has fished in a bunch of big time fishing, these big macho fishing tournaments, has beaten the men twice now in a row. And then she just retired. She just was like, I did it later, and she just dropped the mic and ran off. So, like, I was like, okay, that's a good story. I think I want to do that. And then, football coaches are natural obsessive, so they always intrigue me a lot. So yeah, just kind of, if you look, obsession is everywhere, sort of, if you keep your eyes open for it. But
when you write, do you write it down in longhand first, and then, or you do it right on the keyboard?
I used to do longhand, and for whatever reason, my handwriting's gotten so bad that I actually can't read sometimes what I've written down. So that became kind of an impediment.
I got the same problem.
When I saw a book that I signed in 2004, a friend of mine sent me a picture of whatever. I was like, man, my handwriting was so good back then. It's so bad right now. I apologize in advance for any signing I do. So I do it now on the computer. I still take a lot of notes by hand, and then I'll kind of transcribe those into a document on my computer.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's all the actual writing is done on the computer. It's kind of it's a cool thing to transmit a thought or something like that through your fingers. It's kind of it's a little bit like maybe playing an instrument, I guess, in some weird way. I mean, if you get to type a little bit, type well. I'm a pretty slow typist too, actually.
I'm a pecker.
I'm a little bit.
Yes, you are.
You get a T-shirt.
You open the door.
How did you get somebody to publish you the very first time? Did you have an agent, or did you have a break? How did you
Great
get published the
question.
first
What
time?
kind of writing did you start out doing?
I started. I was actually. I talk about it a little bit in the book, but I graduated from college, and I thought, I'm the oldest of three, and my father passed away when I was young, and I thought, I gotta set an example for my two younger brothers. So I applied to business school, of all things. I cannot stand math, but I was like, I'm gonna just apply to business school, and I got into one. But that very, around that same time, I'd become obsessed with the Littoral, which I mentioned earlier, this little creek, and obsessed with this guy who was about this tall, who was kind of like the dean of the Littoral. He was getting old, and I just something about him. I always loved fishing, but something about this guy really got me. So I wrote this 5,000 word story about this guy, and I sent it to the New Yorker. I sent it everywhere. Everyone said no, but this little publication in the South took it. About the same time I got into business school, and much to my future father-in-law's chagrin, I said, "Screw business school. I'm going to go with the $200 this guy just gave me for this 5,000 word story. Let's do this." So that was the first story. That was the first story I ever published. And then I worked at Sports Afield magazine for a little while. I was basically secretary there for a little while. And then I got hired by Forbes magazine. I wrote, there for 14 years. I think I was there. And then the first book I wrote was actually a story that I had written in Forbes. So I expanded the story. So that's always been it's always been a good thing to write for magazines, because it doesn't often, but sometimes it can lead to bigger things. If you're working out the kernel of an idea, it can be something a lot bigger. And then, so it's just, I pitched the story, and, that's one thing when we're living in New York's a good thing. There's a kind of an ecosystem there of publishing. So I talked to so-and-so who, an editor here who knew someone that book was a Penguin book, knew someone at Penguin, and then knew an agent and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, agent first, then publisher.
Monty, do you and Rick Bragg ever share writing ideas of things?
Say that name?
Rick Bragg?
Rick Bragg. I've never met Rick Bragg. I've
Yeah,
always
man.
wondered him. Yeah.
Yeah.
We write about a lot of things. He
You're
likes
right
football
kind of-
too.
You're the right kind of a life.
Yeah. I've always loved him. He's great.
Yeah. Is he still at the University of Alabama?
I think so.
he is.
Yeah, I think he is.
As you were hanging out with Lefty, Kreh, Andy Mill, do you
I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, they're how-to, Lefty and Andy they do a lot of how-to stuff, and they're great at it. I mean, they can tell you how to. Most people they can coach, I guess. Present company excluded. But yeah, I mean, just being around them was more so than actually reading their stuff. Although I love their stuff too. I have a lot of Lefty's books. I have Andy. Andy did a great book about tarpon, which I have as well. So yeah, I mean, it influenced me a little bit there for sure. But just being around them was more the impetus for that. Anything else?
No, next time you see Coach Saban, tell him this sweet, beautiful girl called him Saban.
I know.
Called him Saban, which is very French.
You're not the first, but a lot of people say that.
That's the French.
You know, it would actually be good for him. Coach Saban.
I knew I did it wrong as soon as it came out of my mouth and I heard some murmurs.
Maybe a nice little humbling thing for him.
Okay, well, if that's it, then we'll segue into the signing.
Thank you again for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Also, you can pre-order Monty's next book downstairs as well, and get a book plate for that. And yes, the line will start downstairs. We'll do the signing downstairs. Thanks for being here, guys.
Hey, actually, guys,
Sorry, Colin. Sorry. Oh, my Cool. Good. My keys rattling. I was like, oh no.
I feel terrible. I saw the.
You're all
Okay, I know. I felt bad. You were managing it the whole time. I'm sorry. It's probably a mess. Anyway.